All right, welcome to those who have joined us. For those who don't know me, I'm Molly Dishner, AMA's Communications Director. And our webinar today is with Barbara Johnson, who ran UAA's Co-op Development Center, and so has some good insight into co-ops in Alaska. We'll get started in just a minute. We are recording and we'll post this on our YouTube for those who can't attend so that other folks can learn from this information. And I think Barbara said feel free to chime in with questions as they come up. And with that, Barbara, I will let you take over.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. As Molly mentioned, my name's Barbara Johnson. I used to be part of the Alaska Cooperative Development Center at UAA. That center unfortunately closed down in September. So we don't currently have any centers dedicated to co-op development in Alaska. That being said, don't worry, I'll mention other resources at the end. Um, I I'll actually go to my my first slide. Sorry, it's two screens. It's always confusing. Give me 1 second. Um, I started working in co-ops about 4 years ago. And I think they're a really fascinating business model, and I really believe in them. And I think they're underutilized in Alaska. And so, although it's no longer my day job, I still enjoy doing things like this, and doing outreach and talking to people about co-ops. That being said, I hate giving presentations. I do enjoy talking. So let's make this as much as possible a conversation. Please ask questions. Um, yeah, just talk through, we can make this more of a conversation. Um, this picture, a lot of the pictures that I use in this presentation are actually of real co-op products from Alaska. Like these are peonies from Alaska Beauty and Homer, and those are oysters from one of the oyster co-ops in Homer. We have co-ops work in Alaska. They have worked for decades, and they really produce great products, provide great services. So I'm also excited to share about some of what people are doing in the state. Um, Again, in the interest of making this a bit more interactive, and also um, I'm a big believer in visualizing. So we're going to play a game, co-op or not. And throughout the presentation, we'll have slides that come up, and you'll probably recognize, hopefully, some of the logos, and you can tell me whether it's a co-op or not, and we can discuss how we know that or what doesn't make it a co-op. So the first one along these lines is REI. Is it a co-op? Is it not a co-op? Logan?
Is, I think.
It
Yeah,
is. Yeah. Anyone else? And I'm realizing I say put it in chat, but I can't even see the chat. And yeah, you're welcome to unmute yourself. You're welcome to put it in the chat. And so REI, for those, I think probably most of us are parts of it, is a co-op. Means as consumers, we are all member owners. Yes, thank you, Jason. Exactly. And so when we go to REI, we are part owners of the co-op, part owners of the business. And then at the end of the year, depending on how much we have spent at REI, we get out what's called the dividend, REI dividend. And so it's based on how much service of the co-op we've used, in this case, access to outdoor gear. That is one of the core features of a co-op is member ownerships, and then dividend at the end of the year based on use of the co-op. We're going to go into more details. So again, ask questions if you want to, but also we'll go more into it. Mentioned the word co-ops a lot. What I've learned in my work is when we talk about co-ops, a lot of there's different definitions. Just so you know, for the purposes of this presentation, cooperatives, informally, we often then call them co-ops, are businesses owned and controlled by those who use their services, and the co-ops aim to maximize the benefits of the member owners. Easy, right? Clear as mud. All we're really saying that a co-op is a business. In fact, in Alaska, a co-op cannot incorporate as a nonprofit. It is a for-profit entity by statutory definition. It is owned by the people or businesses. Businesses can also own co-ops who use them. So the customers are the owners. And one of the key features is that the co-ops, it's a business, it has to generate enough revenue to cover its cost, but it's not aiming to maximize profits for its members. It's aiming for its owners. It's aiming to maximize the benefits for its owners. This is actually, and speaking of, this is a picture from a meal that was prepared using food from the Fairbanks Food Co-op. So it's lunchtime too, so I figured I'd share some of these. Co-ops are a business, and one of the distinguishing features is that they follow what we call the co-op principles. I think of them as best business practices. There's 7 of them. One of them is voluntary and open membership. So that means that not everyone has to be part of your co-op. For example, I'm going to point at Logan because I know you're in Homer. You have the Homer Electric Association, which is actually a co-op. Um, you to be part of it, you have to be resident within the service area. So there is like some criteria for being a member, but technically you don't have to be a member. No one has a gun to the head to join. You could go without the service. So that's what we mean by voluntary and open membership. Democratic control means that one member, one vote, and this is a key part. It doesn't matter how much you invest in the business, everyone just gets one vote. Members vote annually. To elect a board of directors, there's rotating seats, so not every seat expires at the same time. The board of directors then makes long-term decision, manages the general manager or CEO. In smaller co-ops, the board of director might be almost every member, but still, you still vote for the positions and so on. The third one is member economic participation. By that, we mean that you have to have economic tie-in. So REI, to be part of it, I think it's gone up, but it used to be $25 annual membership. That is your buy-in, your economic participation. At the same time, at the end of the year, you get your dividend. So you do need to have that connection. Each co-op is autonomous. And so this means that it is its own entity and it operates with the goal of maximizing benefits for the members. Where this becomes important is in accepting funding. So, for example, if there's an investor who comes from outside and says they will fund a co-op venture for $3 million, but they want they want to be able to make all the decisions, that goes against that autonomous business principle. Education and training. This can mean both education of the board, education of the members about what it means to be part of a co-op, why co-ops are different. Member participation is key to co-ops being successful, but it can also mean training. In the lower 48, there's a purchasing co-op for farmers that puts on free trainings on how to effectively apply pesticides. They consider that part of their co-op principle. Cooperation among cooperatives. We often call this P6. It's a really powerful principle because it encourages co-ops it just forms a business network. It encourages co-ops to support and work with each other while respecting the principles, including autonomy. And the 7th one is careful community. And so it's just looking into your community and doing something for it. It can look like different things. A lot of electric co-ops have scholarships. The Island Artist Gallery in Sitka is an artist. This is actually the one in Juneau, but the one in Sitka, their careful community is that they are open year-round in downtown Sitka. If you've been there, you know that oftentimes a lot of the shops are closed in winter outside of tourist season, and downtown can be pretty deserted. And so what they decided to do was they would make sure that there was one shop that was open year-round for people to go to. I know this is a lot. Any questions, comments about the co-op principles? Awesome. And you can also, again, feel free to put things in the chat. So with all of this, we have these co-op principles. Okay, but it's maybe not clearly explaining how co-ops work. So as I mentioned, to operate, you elect a board of directors that set the long-term direction and major policies. The board of directors is not deciding whether you should be buying a blue or black pen. That's going to be staff. Typically, that's a general manager, which reports to the board of director. They earn revenue by selling products or services. We'll go into examples, different types of co-ops, but a co-op a service can be accessing an accountant or accessing a lawyer, for example, like pooling resources to diminish cost to access those services. And it has normal business expenses. A lot of co-ops, especially in the starting phase, will get into the trap of thinking that they can function with volunteer labor. That's really hard for a number of reasons. Part of it is that it can get you crosswise with workers' comp regulations. And also volunteer labor is not the same as paid labor and the expectations that you have for them. Just in practice, it's really hard to function as a business with volunteer labor. And then, so you operate, you have like a business, you hopefully earn enough to stay open. You're not necessarily maximizing profit. And then when the costs are covered, you reinvest into business, you might build some financial reserves, and then what's left, you'll split it among your members based on how much they purchased through you or the services that they used. Um, Costco, is Costco a co-op? What do we think? Molly says yes. Is that
Yes. Oh,
Jason says no? Yeah, no. Yes, no, anyone else? I'm not hearing or seeing anyone else. So it's actually not a co-op, but this is a common example. So thanks, Molly, for putting one for the team. We do purchase a membership, but we do not have, there's no member, we're not owners of the co-op, of Costco, excuse me. The membership allows us to access and to buy the services and the products there, but we don't actually have any say in the decision making. Our only decision is do we buy the membership or not? We don't have any, we don't elect a board of directors, the shareholders do. We don't have any say. We don't, yeah. But it's very similar because like the membership, you also get like your return. So this is a common example, which is why I brought it up. In Alaska, we use co-ops every day. Credit unions are really common. We actually have the highest number of credit unions per capita. Electric co-ops. I think I had to crunch the numbers and I believe it's something like 89% of Alaskans get their electricity from electric co-ops. Again, one of the highest percentages in the country. We have farmer co-ops, ag co-ops, and fishing co-ops. We have one of the oldest fishing co-ops in the country. And the I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Copper River salmon brand, like Copper River Salmon. It's really popular. That was actually developed by a marketing co-op, the Copper River co-op that no longer exists. But there was a study that found that their branding helped even farmers that were fishermen that were outside of their co-op. And so the benefits of co-ops aren't just necessarily for their member owners; they can extend beyond. Um, One of the misconceptions that I often heard is that co-ops don't work in Alaska for a number of reasons. They actually do, as long as you remember that they are a business. There's some really interesting studies, both not specifically in Alaska, but in Canada, in Europe, in South America, that look at co-op survival rates compared to traditional businesses. And both in the 5-year and 10-year time frame, they outperform traditional businesses as long as they serve an economic need and they follow the co-op principles. Those co-op principles are almost like a recipe for success. The co-ops that succeed follow them. It took me a very long time to wrap my head around them, but those co-op principles are really key, and they also key to deciding whether you should form a co-op or not, and I'll talk into that a bit more. And these numbers are specifically from the study in British Columbia, but I looked, as I mentioned, at studies in other places, and they're very similar, which I thought was interesting to see across all these different countries. Land O'Lakes, is Land O'Lakes a co-op? Molly, yes. Yeah. Yep. They're a co-op. They're one of the biggest co-ops. They're one of the biggest ag co-ops. Um, and then so we've been kind of sharing out co-op examples. I wanted to talk about types of co-ops that we have. Starting from like the easiest to organize, kind of talking on the spectrum. So the first one is that exists is purchasing and shared services co-ops. It might be that you just get together and you buy. I know some food co-ops in the lower 48 formed a co-op to just purchase things like plastic bags and receipt paper. They were able to distribute the cost among them. There's another co-op in Washington State that was formed by caregivers. They needed someone to to organize their schedule, keep track of who was went to see clients and billing insurance. So shared one of the biggest co-ops in the country provides bulk purchasing to vet clinics. So it can look very different things. And it allows basically to distribute cost and centralize resources. One of the biggest purchasing and shared services co-ops that we have is Ace Hardware. The C actually stands for co-op. It's a retailer-owned co-op, so each store owns the co-op. I thought was interesting. And they purchase the merchandise in bulk. Consumer co-ops are not a very common type of co-ops. Think REI, think food co-ops. It's anytime when the members are the customers. The people who shop there are the owners. One example, these are real products sold by the Kodiak Harvest Food Co-op in Kodiak. They were formed in 2015. They've been growing. They're actually expanding to a new space in the Canna marketplace now. They emerged from a desire, excuse me, from Kodiak residents to be able to access fresher food and local seafood. One thing that they're known for is the canned Kodiak salmon, which is actually really hard to find outside of the co-op. And it was actually on my title page. They reinvest over $50,000 annually in the local community, and they have one full-time manager and then some part-time staffers. So they're an example of an Alaskan consumer co-op, and then we have, as I mentioned, some of the bigger ones. And then another example is producer co-ops. The members are the producers, and sometimes this can overlap with the shared services co-ops and some other types of co-ops. But essentially, the co-op is owned by the producers. An example is Alaska Beauty Peony Co-op, whose peonies are pictured here. They are based in Homer. The individual farms own the co-op, and the co-op owns a refrigerated trailer where they can store the peonies before shipping them, and the co-op hires a general manager to take care of orders and shipping and so on, and develop value-added products. The co-op developed a brand, Pickjoy, that was done under the co-op umbrella. So each individual farm grows its own peonies, and then they have to meet a certain standard to be able to bring them to the co-op. And so that's another popular example. And then we don't have any examples of worker-owned co-ops in Alaska yet. There's a number of reasons for that, but these are businesses that are owned and controlled by their employees. These are different than ESOPs. We don't have to get into the details of that, but famous examples, at least in the co-op world, is a cab company in Madison, some vet clinics. Small businesses are seeing transitioning to worker-owned co-ops as a way for owners to get out of the business when they're retiring and sell it to their employees. So we are seeing a lot of interest, and that's being seen as a tool for that, for a transition. We just haven't seen an example in Alaska just yet. Um, Treetop applesauce. Do we think it's a co-op or not a co-op? I lost Molly. Yeah. Thanks, Logan. Yeah, it is actually. They're another farmer-owned co-op. Um, so we actually see a lot of the products we can buy on store shelves are actually coming from co-ops. Um, Co-ops are different. I've talked about how that co-op. I want to emphasize that co-ops are different than traditional businesses, and that's something that's important not to underestimate. Um, they again work to maximize the member benefits rather than profits. There's democratic decision making. They're governed by cooperative rules. Um, you need a lot of communication in co-ops. When I first started, I reached out to a lot of co-op developers and asked what was the biggest mistake that co-op developers did, or what was something that made co-ops fail? And they said not spending enough time building community. Developer after developer said that, and I thought that was really interesting because members are so tied in, because co-ops and members have these are linked. They need to be successful. The member owners need to want to use the products or the services provided by the co-op. And for that to happen, the co-op needs to be meeting the member owner needs. They also need to be able to work together. Conflict resolution there's always going to be conflict. It's not necessarily negative, but co-ops need to be able to address those conflicts, and communication is probably much bigger than in other entities. If you form an LLC, how decisions in LLCs tend to be based on ownership percentage. In co-ops, again, it doesn't matter how much you invest in the business, you get one vote, and that's a key part. That being said, still a business. I've often given presentations where people ask me about grants available for co-ops. I've never come across, there's very few grants available for co-ops, and they are only really for the startup phase or for developing a product. They will not last long term. You still need management, accounting, planning. You still need other things that businesses need. One of the challenges is that there's a big misunderstanding about how co-ops are different than businesses, including from lawyers, including from accountants, including from lenders. And so you do have that additional hurdle when you form a co-op that you have to do a lot of education and you have to yourself understand those differences. Um, and again, they're not nonprofits. And this is really, really important to remember. Um, what makes a co-op successful? The flip side of this and kind of related, having a clear economic reason to exist. Rural America was actually electrified by co-ops. Long story short, um, urban cities received were private companies were providing electricity in urban areas. And while the rural market could be profitable, it wasn't as profitable as the urban one. And so there was no incentive for the companies to go out and electrify them. The government passed a series of acts, including the Rural Electrification Act, that allowed entities, co-ops, to access these loans to electrify rural America. Again, they were still profitable. They just weren't as profitable as urban areas. And so they just needed, so co-ops were a great tool for that because they were working to maximize the benefits to the member owners, in this case, electrification. They still needed to cover the cost, and there was the market to do that, but they didn't need to generate a profit, maximize profit for their owners who may or may not be using the services. Another example is there was some Sendnetters, excuse me, in Ugashik who wanted to sell their salmon to down in Bristol Bay. They wanted to sell their salmon, but the processing plant was not willing to send a boat because there was a more profitable fisheries. The fishermen formed a co-op that owned a boat that would just transport the Sendnetters fish down. There was again enough of a market for it, and the goal of the co-op was not to maximize profit. It's just needed to generate enough money to stay in business and provide the services to the member owners. And so that is really key, is having that economic reason to exist. There also needs to be member support and participation. A lot of ideas that on paper sound like a great idea for co-ops, if members cannot get along, or I know one person who said she just prefers to do work by herself, and that's okay. That's good to know, but she's not a good candidate to be part of a co-op. Having a dedicated group of people to form a co-op. Forming a co-op takes on average a year to 2 years. There's a lot of steering committees, discussions, um, going back, what feels like going back to the drawing board, making sure that there's an agreement on the services, and it's all unpaid work. And in addition, generally to everything else that you're already doing. Uh, it takes a lot. Most of the successful co-ops that exist now will tell you that their success is thanks to really a dedicated group of volunteers who brought them to a certain point or are still part of it. The members also need to be willing to purchase the services or the products from the co-op, because the co-op needs to generate that revenue to stay in business. And also, especially important for producer co-ops, making sure that there is enough volume for the co-op to stay in business and to meet if it's selling those products. Um, and and a clear understanding with the member owners of what services they can expect, an agreement on how products, what if any products can be sold outside of the co-op, and so on. In addition, you do need a business plan. You need professional management, clear member agreements so members know again, like, can they use if a co-op owns a fridge, can you use the fridge to store other products? Yes or no? How is that decided? Things like that. Regular communication and having a market in which if you're producing a market in which to sell. This is kind of the flip side, and I've talked a lot about this, but I think it's so I won't go into too many details, but there are some challenges to running a co-op. Um, the best thing about co-ops are people. The worst thing about co-ops are people. And so really having that communication and conflict resolution is part of it. There's a great guide online called Establishing. It's by Alaska Sea Grant. It's available for free from the NOAA website, and I can send out a link afterwards. Talked about establishing co-ops in the fisheries industry in Alaska. And it had this extensive discussion about how um, it's really hard for co-ops to raise enough investment capital for big infrastructure projects. So if you're looking at doing that, a co-op may not be the right tool for it. Um, management capacity, market challenges like any business. Um, the co-ops have run into issues with the workers' compensation. Currently, as written, um, my understanding is that the workers' compensation regulation says that a, if a co-op must pay for workers' comp if owners own 10% or less of for any owner that owns 10% or less of a business. The problem is that effectively because membership shares in co-ops are divided equally, um, that that means that any co-op with over 10 people could run into this. I know there's a lot of work by the Farm Bureau to address that legislatively, but just so you're aware, there are some issues with workers' comp right now. As I mentioned, advisors, business advisors, lenders, lawyers may not be familiar with the co-op model and may not know how it functions differently. And so there can be that education piece. Um, so this is actually, this is my last slide. All of this to say, should we use the cooperative model? And this is very simple, as you can see, kind of flow chart. And the question is that it really depends. This is adapted, and I want to give credit to the Wisconsin Co-op Development Center. They developed this flow chart, and I kind of adapted it. But it is a really helpful tool, and it's worth working through as you're deciding for your needs if a co-op could be a good one. As you can see, there are some key parts, like how do you plan to finance your co-op? If you're looking for grants and donations, then you really want to look at a nonprofit and not a co-op. Are you willing to follow the 7 co-op principles? Is everyone willing to have democratic member control? Um, is there an economic need that you're meeting? These are all key parts to whether the co-op is the right tool. Um, I also mentioned some resources. There are Alaska co-op development centers in other states are still open. Because Alaskan people are outside of their service areas, there might be a fee, and so generally they range in, I want to say $60 to $100 per hour. Generally, the intake is free. Um, there's a lot of resources online. The USDA has excellent co-op resources. Uh, the Alaska Co-op website, alaskacoops.com, is still up. And that has guides to working with small co-ops. It's another great resource. Small Business Development Center, the Alaska Small Business Development Center has a series of on-demand webinars about co-ops. Their advisors have also been learning a lot about co-ops. There's some consultants who may be able to help, and also just some networks. So, and that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Barbara. And I think we have time for questions if anyone has any questions, wants to dive further into those resources. Welcome to unmute and ask or ask in the chat.
Yeah, I'll pop up for me. Fantastic presentation, Barbara. Really appreciate it. Very thorough and answered a lot of my questions in time as you were presenting. But a couple things came up in my mind. In us, in so if we're talking about a potential like shared refrigeration unit in a small community, um, purchase run by a co-op, how if in the future that co-op dissolves, how is the shared resources, how do you navigate the dissolution and what should folks plan for if they are trying to put something together? Just being mindful of what happens down the road if things don't work out.
So that would be addressed in the bylaws. So when you incorporate, you also write bylaws.
Mhm.
And so that's unlike in any business. I also, and I'm blanking right now, I know that the Alaska statute also has provisions if it's not addressed in the bylaws. It's something along the lines of you would first pay any debt owed by the co-op, and there's an order in which it's done. Um, and then and don't quote me on this, but I think it's along the lines of one option would be you would probably just sell their unit and then divide whatever profit after the debt is paid among existing members. Another thing along those lines is sometimes you buy in and maybe members leave. And so there is also a provision in the bylaws. How do you deal with that? Do you reimburse people that buy in shares? What if the co-op can't reimburse? And so generally there'll be a provision of if the co-op is in a financial position, members will be reimbursed when they leave.
That. Thank you.
Mhm.
Another question, which could have some implications on the mariculture industry, but um, could be a way for mariculture industry to fit in with a broader issue that's happening, particularly in rural Alaska, with regards to the needs for temperature control, both holding products that would be leaving that community as well as products that need to come in. And that's keeping yogurt cool, but also keeping onions from freezing type stuff. And so you can see where that need spans a number of different interests and industries. Is it common for something like that can really, a lot of the co-ops in your examples were like a fisherman's co-op that was like a very discrete group of people hitting a need that they had specifically. This would be more broader and across potential
Yeah.
industries. Are there examples of that to sort of, deal with these challenges that we see in rural Alaska and so on and so forth with supply chain and the need for cold storage, et cetera?
Specifically for supply chain, not that I'm aware of. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm just not aware of it, and it's been a long-standing problem. There's another type of co-ops called multi-stakeholder co-ops that I didn't mention, and so it's what it sounds like. And so you may have fishermen be part owners, and a tribe might be a part owner, and a municipality might be a part owner. So you have very much different groups of owners. Sometimes there'll also you also have the employees be part owners, and so you mix in worker-owned co-ops with, say, consumer and all of that. Every degree of co-op gets more complicated. And so often what I recommend is if you don't have to do a co-op and you can do it another way, don't do it. Where co-ops are great is they give you that framework with the principles. And so there's a really successful example in Canada, on the East Coast where a logging company was going out of business, and the community in the town got together and purchased a logging company and formed a multi-stakeholder co-op. They're often cited as a successful example because they did such a great job of just organizing all the stakeholders and a clear understanding of everyone's role, what everyone was getting out of this co-op, and how everyone was operating. Um, but multi-stakeholder co-ops, they're really interesting, but they can be really complicated. Um, the temperature control and supply chain is a really tough one. I know there's also been a lot of work on food hubs, which is similar, but not what you're talking about. The USDA has some great reports on that also looked at what business volume you need for it. But again, those are not multi-state, those are not co-ops. So
Great. Thank you very much.
yeah.
How do am I on there?
Yeah, you are. Hi, Mark.
Okay. Hey, yeah, I just guess I'd share a little bit about the Seafood Producers Co-op in Alaska and kind of some things Jason sort of asked about. They're the longest co-op. I think they've been here since before statehood, and they're the only one that's lasted. There have been lots of fishermen's co-ops, and they
Yeah.
don't last. A lot of for the reasons you said, and I think a few interesting things about the fishermen's co-op, but that may have relevance to the mariculture for kelp, maybe for oysters, but is that well, one they I know like out of the Pelican plant, and maybe I'm not sure on Craig how they do it, but they work with other processors for things like refrigeration and uh, collecting the fish at these places and then taking them to the plant in Sitka. So they don't own them, but they rent them or they they work with the other facilities that are already there, so it isn't that they have to encumber that full cost to do
Mhm.
it. And the other one is, I think they have kind of a unique exit strategy that he also asked about. In that, I can't remember what it is now, but let's just say it's $5,000 to join, and so you're a part owner of the co-op, and you're going to get that money back. But when you can't just come in and get out. If you when you get out, that money's paid over a number of years. So somebody
Okay.
that's going to join the co-op knows they sort of better be in for the long haul, and the co-op knows if they want the people in for the long haul, um, they need to get more money for their fish than the fishermen can get otherwise over the long haul. So
Yeah.
I think they're a great model for
Mhm.
any co-op in the state that to try to follow, because they've lasted this long.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. And they're actually one of the oldest co-ops in fishing co-ops in the country, not just Alaska. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other comments? As I mentioned, I now do this for fun. I have another job, but if you have any questions or want any resources, I'll make sure I'll send this to Molly, the slides to Molly. But also feel free to email me. Um, if I can't get to it, I'll let you know if it's too much. But I'm also happy to just answer a few questions. It's kind of my careful community, co-op principle 7. I do think co-ops are a really fascinating model. And there's a lot of potential in Alaska.
Thanks, Barbara. And if there aren't more questions, I will share Barbara's slides and contact info with folks along with the recording. And thanks everyone for tuning in.